And we are going to start watching this. Kiki's Delivery Service chocolate cake. Lisa.
Would you do me a favor and open the box?
Yep.
Hello there, welcome back to another episode of Anime with Alvin, where today we're going to be making the nice thick chocolate cake from Kiki's Delivery Service, one of my favorite films from Miyazaki. Now, in the movie, this cake looks delicious. There's not too many details about what kind of cake it is, but I'm guessing it's one of those just big, thick, delicious chocolate cakes that taste really good and make you happy for the day. So I'm going to take this opportunity to put a little personal twist on this cake, as if I were making it for my friends and for myself. There's going to be a lot of chocolate involved. I'm going to use around 500 grams of semi-sweet dark chocolate. I like to start with bars because that means they're a little bit easier to manage, and then crush them and chop them down into little pieces. This is going to be used for later, and I don't need them to be any particular size, so just chopped up is fine. Now, working with all this chocolate is making me kind of hungry. Thankfully, our friends at Boxu can help with that. Boxu is a premium Japanese snack box that works with family businesses all over Japan to deliver a new theme of treats every month.
I like
When
Boxu.
it comes to giving
As
gifts,
somebody
I
who actually
personally
bought
love to
Boxu
give gifts that you
subscriptions,
can
like,
actually consume. And
I
this is a
actually
really
like
good
Boxu
one
a
for
lot.
those people in your life who love food that you're not exactly quite sure how to shop for. My personal favorites from this month's box, snacks that kind of tasted like takoyaki or tonkatsu sauce. Super salty, crunchy, a little sour, and addictive. I also really like the senbei they included. Again, just nice and crunchy, and
I
reminded
love
me of
senbei.
snacks that I had as a kid. So if you want to give the gift of Japanese snacks and support our channel, click the link in the description and use my code ALVIN to get $15 off your first Boxu order. First things first, I should probably get started on making the cake batter because that's going to take some time to bake and cool. So, in a stand mixer, I'm going to mix in my dry ingredients, 390 grams of cake flour, 600 grams of sugar, and 1.5 cup of unsweetened cocoa powder, a tablespoon of baking powder, half tablespoon of baking soda, and 1.5 tablespoons of kosher salt. I like to go pretty heavy on salt in chocolate cakes because it tastes pretty good. While that's just combining until mixed, I'm going to mix together my liquid. I've got 3/4 of a cup of chilled coffee instead of water, 4 eggs, 2/3 cup of vegetable oil. I'm just going to whisk that together until it is
I
combined.
already love this
And
recipe.
slowly pour
Using
our wet
coffee instead
ingredients
of water.
into
Fuck
the
yeah,
dry
Alvin.
mix. Once that's starting to
love it.
incorporate, I'm also going to pour in 3/4 of a cup of buttermilk, which is going to add a nice consistency and save us from having to use a bunch of oil in the cake. After tasting the batter, which I do like to do because it's fun and it gives you a good judgment of how you want to make it today, I decided I wanted to go a little bit more intense on the flavor. So, adding in a pretty healthy glug of vanilla extract. I've learned that you do need a glug, it's kind of a lot. Then I'm actually going to go and enhance the coffee flavor because coffee and chocolate go together really well. So just throwing in an espresso shot, and once that's combined, I'm going to decide that the flavor is there. But honestly, in chocolate cake, I've learned that if you have chocolate chips in there, it's kind of like finding some hidden treasure. So we found some chocolate chips just lying around, and I'm just going to be generous and add a couple of handfuls. Honestly, you could probably add as much as you want. They're all going to sink to the bottom and almost create this nice little chocolatey crust for each layer of the cake. Alright, now I'm going to line the bottom of 2 9-inch cake pans and pour our batter in. Okay, I think I might have made this recipe for an 8-inch one, so there's a little bit of a room left. I don't think it's going to bake up to the height that we need it to make that thick and tall cake. So with the help of Rachel, we made another 50% of the previous batch of batter and poured that on top of each one so that we actually have the height that we need. Thank you,
There
Rachel.
we go.
Okay, these are just going to go into an oven at 350 degrees until they are ready. I like to not really time it. I kind of go by the fact the middle isn't wobbly anymore, and when you touch the middle, it springs back. Alright, on to the chocolate frosting. Now, instead of just a typical chocolate frosting that just has butter, powdered sugar, and cocoa powder, I'm not usually a big fan of those. I prefer something more like a cream cheese chocolate frosting. So, in a same stand mixer, I'm going to cream together 16 ounces of butter at room temperature, as well as 16 ounces of cream cheese, which is at room temperature. And I think the tanginess will go well with the balance of the chocolate cake. Then I'm going to add in 2 cups of unsweetened cocoa powder and blend that together until it is nice and evenly combined. Then I'm going to slowly add in a pound of powdered sugar. To help that get along, I'm going to go and add in a splash of milk. Not too much, a little does go a long way when it comes to frostings, and add extra powdered sugar until it has reached the taste and consistency that I enjoy. I don't like it to be too sweet because you can definitely add way too much powdered sugar, but not enough makes the frosting a little runny. Also, don't forget about a tablespoon of salt. The frosting also needs salt as well. Alright, once we have tasted it and felt the texture and everybody likes where we're going to go ahead and set this to the side and take our cakes out. These are going to be cooled and inverted on a wire rack so that when they press downwards from the weight of itself, it kind of helps you shape the dome already, so you don't have to trim off too much. While our cake layers are cooling before we can cut into them, I'm going to go ahead and get started on the most signature visual aspect of this cake, the decoration on top. It has big letters of Kiki, a little tree on the left, and Kiki herself riding her broomstick with her signature red hair bow, and the cat clinging onto the back of the broomstick. Not sure I'm going to do that just yet. So there's a couple of options. We went through, white chocolate or marzipan, but ultimately I think fondant, even though I'm not a huge fan, is probably going to be the easiest option because honestly I think this is more of a visual thing and not that much of a flavor thing. So first I'm going to tackle the green and the red just a little bit. I'm going to take a pinch of white fondant that you can get at the store pretty easily and fold in some green and red food coloring. Definitely wear gloves for this one. Just going to squeeze a little bit and mush it together until it has reached the color you desire. That's my green. Then I'm going to go to the red. If it starts to get a little bit sticky, you can always add a little bit of oil to your hands. That will kind of keep things a little more smooth and not too crazy because adding food coloring adds liquid to the fondant. Okay, I'm going to cover those up while I work on the white parts. First, I'm going to tackle the letters, big K's and big I's. So I'm going to take out a giant chunk of this white fondant, roll it out with a rolling pin. It's pretty smooth. And I'm going to hand cut the letters with rounded edges. This is definitely more venturing into arts and crafts than it is cooking, but it is still a very important part of this cake. So we will persevere and try not to have too many neck and back problems by the end of this. Okay, now for the really tricky part, the actual cutout of Kiki and the cat herself. This one took significantly longer than the letters, I would say. I think Tony checked the recording. I was hunched over for about 38 minutes, which explains why my back hurts the next day, but we take those. Alright, now we are going to make sure that these decorations are covered so they don't crack and set them aside until we are ready to use them on the top of our cake. So, now that our cake layers have cooled, I'm going to shave off the rounded part of these cakes. Don't worry, even though this is a pretty significant chunk of cake, we are not going to let that go to waste. We're going to make some fun snacks out of them at the very end. Okay, now this is not a super layered cake. This is 2 layers, which means it needs to be 2 layers of frosting that are relatively thick. So to begin assembling this cake, I'm putting down a little smidge of frosting on the cake turner, putting down my parchment, and repeating so that we can anchor the bottom slice of cake. Once that layer is down, I'm giving a generous helping of this chocolate cream cheese frosting. And because this is a cream cheese frosting and not a typical one with only butter, it actually makes a little bit more sense to put more frosting because it is going to be less heavy than the typical butter sugar frosting and a little on the tangier side and just taste more delicious and not frosting that people kind of scoop away and off to the side. Alright, using the help of this cake turn, I'm going to spread that evenly, layer the second layer on top, and give this a nice coat of frosting on the top to finish. I'm trying to achieve a smooth outside and top because I want to do a ganache cover for that shiny chocolate look the cake has in the movie. So once the cake is as smooth as I can probably do it by hand with a thick layer of frosting on the top and the outside, I'm going to set this in the freezer until it is no longer tacky to the touch. Okay, while that freezes, let's make some ganache. We have the chopped up chocolate from earlier, about 500 grams. I'm going to pour in cream slowly from the side. Now, I actually learned from a master chocolatier that in order to make really smooth ganache, there's a couple of things that could be fun to use. One is the technique of pouring the cream down the side into the chocolate, almost like a beer, where you don't want to agitate a lot of the stuff because you don't want to create air bubbles. Once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and microwave this slowly until it is nice and hot. Not a bad idea to go a little bit less than you need. The worst thing you can have is burnt chocolate in a ganache. I kind of did it for 30 seconds and then 30 more and then 30 more until I felt like it was ready. And then in order to make sure that the chocolate is nice and warm through, I'm going to shake it a little bit and cover this with a plate so that it almost has time for the heat to not necessarily steam itself, but evenly distribute within the chocolate. If you start mixing now, there's still going to be jagged chunks and I want to warm the chocolate through evenly. Now here's where I learned some interesting things about making ganache. The chef that taught me says to put the spatula onto the bottom like you would normally mix it, but make sure that the spatula never leaves the bottom of the mixing container. The spatula must always be in contact with the bottom because it will be stirred slowly in a circle without creating any air bubbles. If you lift it up and put it down, there's a chance you could incorporate air. And so this method does take about 5 minutes or so, a very slow and agonizing stirring. And he says that, it's probably not going to look like anything's happening. And it's supposed to be like that. But after 5 minutes or so, things will slowly start to come together, and that you know that the fruits of your labor have been ripened. and that's not the phrase. And again, I'm very slowly stirring from the center only and then gradually working my way out. And once the ganache starts to come together, in order to make sure that all those particles are going to be nice and melted, I move side to side instead, creating almost like a wave pool back and forth, because this causes more agitation and more clashing of the chocolate inside rather than stirring it in a circle, which might miss some bits because it's kind of a vortex. Is this all maybe too much detail for ganache? Possibly, but the result? No air bubbles, and that's what I like to see. Okay, now that our ganache is ready to pour, we're going to take our frozen assembled cake, which is just frozen on the outside, set that over a smaller baking pan, just over a tray to catch any drip, and we're going to make sure to pour that ganache right on top, being pretty generous with it so that it creates these large waves that kind of go down the sides. Otherwise, you get too many of these uneven drips that go down the side, and you kind of want it to wave over the sides. Alright, once the temperature of the outside of the cake has solidified a lot of the ganache, and you kind of have these icicles, I like to take those off with a spoon or a little knife and treat them to myself, which means eat them. Okay, don't worry about all the ganache that we spilled over. We will use that all up at the very end, because that is a big pet peeve of mine when I see all these glazing cake videos and nobody shows what they do with the glaze. Alright, now that our cake has been finished, we need to start to finish the decoration on top. I'm going to take the cake carefully, put it on a nice little doily, because that's how it looks like it came in the show, and then I'm going to put my decoration slowly on the cake. First by starting with the Kiki on the bottom, then by putting Kiki herself and her broomstick in the middle, and put the cat on her tail, and trim the tree slightly to fit into the side, because apparently I made the letters Kiki a little too big, but that's okay. And I present our version of the chocolate cake from Kiki's delivery service. Tall, thick, and ready to be sliced. So that is exactly what we're going to do. Let's get a nice thick slice over here. Pull out a wedge to show you the cross section. That looks pretty good. Very even, thick layers all throughout.
Fucking good.
Slice. You clearly see where the cake ends and the frosting begins. It's almost as thick as the cake itself, but that should be delicious. But let's find out if that is true. It is in fact true, this cake is delicious. The chocolate actually goes really well with the cream cheese. I kind of like how not typical chocolate cake this is, because everybody knows what that store-bought chocolate cake tastes like, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think this is a cake that is a little bit more eatable, that you can kind of go back in for multiple bites of everything. You don't really want to scrape anything to the side, except maybe the fondant, because nobody actually likes eating fondant. If they say that, they're lying. Alright, so now with the leftovers that we made from this cake, there's all that ganache from earlier and all those cake scraps. Here's what I personally like to do. I'm going to use a rubber spatula to remove all of the ganache and transfer that back into the pouring container, which also has a lot of ganache, trying to waste as little bit as possible. I'm now going to just directly throw in those cake scraps that we had from earlier, just big chunks, and then take a spoon and kind of crush that up until you make like a chocolate cake paste with as little lumps as possible. Still, because the ganache is warm, I'm going to put this into the fridge to set up, and once it's solidified a little bit more, about 30 minutes or so, take those out, put on some gloves, and take this chocolate ganache mixture and roll them into nice little balls. I'm going to essentially make cake truffles or cake pops, but without the stick. Because chocolate truffles are usually just ganache, and cake pops are cake plus frosting. In this case, we kind of get the best of both worlds. Once these are nice and rolled up, I'm going to dip them in a final layer of cocoa powder that we have lying around so that they're a little bit more presentable. And look at that, 20 to 30 cake truffles, all created from the scraps and leftover from our cake, which I say is somewhat even more exciting than the cake itself, because this is a whole nother dish that you could give to a friend for a party. Like Tony, he's going to a Friendsgiving party right now, so we gave him all of these. But we have to make sure they taste good, so let's go ahead and try it. Tastes like a chocolate cake truffle. Tastes like it was not made as a byproduct of something else, which is the most important part. And once you divided up all the cake and truffles, we are now off to make our next delivery, just like Kiki is. In this case, I'm delivering this cake to my own house. 5 stars. Thanks again to our friends over at Boxu for supporting this episode. Boxu is a premium Japanese snack box that works with family businesses all over Japan to deliver a new theme of treats every month. So I have a lot of people in my life who appreciate good food, but some of them don't actually get the opportunity to try really unique and cool flavors from Japan like this. So it's always a fun gift to give to friends, because you can kind of almost go through the box together, pick out new favorites, and ultimately leave with a happy belly full of new experiences. If you want to try these snacks for yourself or give the gift of authentic Japanese snacks to someone else, click the link in the description and use my code ALVIN to get $15 off your first Boxu order.
Yeah, that cake looks really good. Alvin did a really good job. A+.